alive and he's living on the inside, roaring like a lion, like God is not dead. He's surely alive and he's living on the inside, roaring like a lion, like God is not dead. He's surely alive and he's living.
We're continuing in our sermon series on Revealed in Red, things that Jesus Christ said in the last 48 hours of his life. My sermon is entitled, Where the Power Lies, and I just have to ask you a question. Here we are about the middle of March, and I'm just curious. You don't have to raise your hand if you don't want to. How many of you have filed your taxes so far? Raise your hand. Okay, about a third of you, it looks like. A boy really needed $100 in order to get this special toy that he wanted, and he had been praying about it and really wanted this $100, so he decided he would write a letter to God. So he wrote a letter to God and asked for the money and addressed it to God, USA, because God lives here, you know that. And so the post office got the letter, and they decided they'd send it on to the president. And so the president got the letter, and he was looking at it, and he was moved by it, and he stuck a $5 bill in there, figuring that the boy would thought $5 was a lot of money, and sent the letter back, and the boy got the letter, and he was really excited, and he wrote a letter back to God, and he in the letter he said, "Dear God, thank you so much for the money that you sent, but I noticed that you sent the letter, the post office sent the letter through Washington, D.C., and wouldn't you know it, those people took $95 worth of taxes out of that $100. You know, a lot of people would say one of the most powerful places in this world is Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of people that, you know, and in Washington, D.C., you see a lot of wrestling for power and power struggles between Republicans and Democrats, between Congress and the president, and these power struggles are taking place. And what nobody really seems to understand is that the people have the power, not the government. It is the citizens. They decide who sits in that office. They decide who votes for them in Congress. It is the people. But today, we really find out that the true power in this world is through Jesus Christ. And that's the power you can count on, because governments rise and governments fail. And I hope the United States goes on for centuries and centuries. But there haven't been too many governments that have done that. And who knows what may someday replace the United States. We don't know. That's not unpatriotic to say that. It's a reality check. That having been said, there was a power struggle taking place at the end of Jesus' life. And it's found in John chapter 19, verse 4. John 19, verse 4. Once more, Pilate came out and said to the Jews gathered there, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no basis of a charge against him." And when Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe, Pilate said to them, "Here's the man." And as soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" But Pilate answered, "You take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis of a charge against him." The Jewish leaders insisted, "We have a law, and according to the law, he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God." When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. "Where do you come from?" he asked Jesus, but Jesus gave him no answer. "Do you refuse to speak to me?" Pilate said. "Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you. Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of a greater sin. On this day, we see a power struggle taking place, and the Pharisees thought they had the power. They thought they had the power. They were the religious leaders. They were the elite. They were the ones that you were supposed to look up to and gasp in awe of these people and their greatness. They are so righteous, so virtuous, and so godly. And they made up half of the Sanhedrin, which was the governing body for Judea. And they did, to some degree, have some power. But their power, for the most part, was pretense. They had no real authority. Their country was not just occupied by Rome, they were part of the Roman Empire. And if they wanted to buy something, if they wanted to use currency, it was Roman coin. And it had the image of Caesar on it. They thought they had the power. But their power was limited by Rome. If they wanted to pass major laws, they had to have it approved by Rome first. They had no authority to carry out a death sentence. It had to be approved by Rome. They thought they had the power, and they were trying to wield that power on that day. Someone else thought they had power too. Pilate thought he had the power. Of all the places in the empire to command, he drew the worst. He drew Judea. I mean, he could have gone to Gaul, which is France, or maybe even to North Africa, to Egypt. You know, those are pretty nice places. He could have gone to some province in Italy or Spain, but he was stuck in Judea. Judea was like the worst place to go. There was nothing but trouble in Judea. It didn't really have any decent vacation spots either. And so he was stuck there. He had the authority of Rome. He could command any and all people in Judea. And he could kill anyone that he wanted to in Judea. And he had an army to back him up. But it proved all that power, all the power of the Roman Empire proved useless when he tried to find a way to let Jesus live. Because as much as you want to turn your nose up and point your finger at Pilate for crucifying Jesus, he did a lot to try to get Jesus off the hook. I don't find any fault with this person. We want him crucified. Okay, I'll have him beaten. Okay? I'll have him flogged. And had him beaten, flogged. Okay, he's been punished. No, that's not good enough. We want him crucified. Jesus, give me something. You know, what do you say about yourself? Jesus, quiet, solemn. You know, he was looking for a way. Oh, well, you know, I find out he's from Nazareth. You know, I'm going to send him on up to Herod and let Herod do judgment over him. He didn't want to have anything to do with the situation. He knew Jesus was innocent. Herod said, I can't do anything with him. Send him back to Pilate. So Pilate stuck with him again. Why? I know what I'll do. I'll get the worst possible criminal out of the prison. And I'll have them stand beside Jesus, and I'll let them choose between Jesus and this Barabbas guy. I mean, after all, just a week ago, they were shouting Hosanna, and they were having celebrations because of this Jesus. and people were flocking to him, surely they'll let him off the hook. Instead, they said, give us Barabbas! Well, what do I do with Jesus? Crucify him! Pilate did a lot to try, but despite all of his power, it proved useless. If he had to put down another riot, it would have drawn the attention of the emperor, who he wasn't on good terms with at the time. If a Jewish delegation had decided to go talk to the emperor themselves, it wouldn't have been good for them. Caesar was compliant and was okay with the Jewish people. He would have been in a world of trouble. He was on thin ice. He had no power. But what the Pharisees didn't understand, and what Pilate didn't understand, which Jesus brought to light, was power comes from heaven. I don't care who you elect on election day. I don't care who sits in the Oval Office or who sits in Congress, or sits in the governor's office in Indianapolis. True power comes from heaven. And no power, according to Scripture, no power can exist without God's permission, without God allowing it. Jesus said, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Romans chapter 13, verse 1 says this, let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Why do I bring this up? Because there's a lot of chaos in the world, and a lot of governments and a lot of people make poor choices. And a lot of people suffer because of it. But this is not heaven. And God has a plan. And His hope is not in the seeds of power of any particular government. His hope is in the redemption of mankind. Jesus wants people saved. Okay? He doesn't care about political agendas. He wants people saved. He wants to spend eternity with you and I. You need to understand God, despite the chaos, despite things that seem to be out of hand, God has never let go of control. God is in control. And you may get anxious tonight, and you may start wondering, and then you may get on Facebook and complain about this politician or that politician. But I promise you, God is in control. Power comes from heaven. Jesus said He has the power. He has the power. He demonstrated His power over sickness by healing multitudes. He demonstrated His power over death by raising the dead. He demonstrated His power and authority over the elements when He walked on water and when He told the wind and the waves to be still. Let there be no mistake, on that day in which Jesus stood before the Sanhedrin and before King Herod and before Pilate and before the people, there was only one true person that was in power that day, and that was Jesus. He did not have life taken from Him. He laid down His life willingly. You need to also understand that you have God's power in you. God's power is in you. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4 says, the weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds.